What's up guys, Zell here, and today we got a new patch in Final Fantasy XIV, and this time we have a new ultimate called Dragonsong War Reprise Ultimate. That's a mouthful, I'll probably just call it Dragonsong War. And in theme of the new ultimate, I want to just talk about ultimates in general because I figure this might be the first time a bunch of new players to the game are trying an ultimate raid. So this is going to be kind of a what can you expect in an ultimate raid and help you prepare for the new ultimate. So let's start with why should you care about ultimate raids? It's actually been a long time since we've gotten a new ultimate. It's been 2.5 years since the release of the Epic of Alexander, which was the last one. And the reason why people do these ultimate raids is primarily for glam. That's at least for me. So one of the rewards that you get for completing an ultimate raid is a brand new title which says something the legend. So if you complete Uwu, it's the ultimate legend. If you complete Yukab, it's the legend. If you complete T, it's the perfect legend. And now I believe this new one is the heavens legend. So yeah, you get a fancy new title so you can show off to people that you are a legend. The other side of it is of course the totems that you get from completing the raid, and you can turn those in for special shiny weapons that you can't get anywhere else. And these weapons are, they're amazing. They're some of my favorite weapons in the game, and I think that sentiment is shared by a lot of people. These weapons are just so sick. They're very, very shiny, and they have unique sort of lighting effects on them that make them really stand out. Last but not least, the reason why you should do an ultimate raid is because they are fun. They are, of course, the most challenging raid content that exists in Final Fantasy XIV, but I actually think that makes it even more fun. So if you're looking for a challenge, if you're looking to embark on a journey with your static or, God forbid, pugging, yeah, ultimates are great. So what can you expect from an ultimate raid, and why are they so difficult? Well, the first thing is ultimate raids are essentially a boss gauntlet where you face multiple bosses in quick succession. And I say quick, but really the entire fights can take up to 18 minutes. They are very long. And one of the reasons why ultimate raids are so difficult is because that there are no checkpoints. If you get to the third boss and you make a mistake and you wipe the party, that's too bad. You're going to start all the way from the beginning. The sheer length to these fights means that you have to be very concentrated and focused for a long period of time together with all of your party members. And yeah, it's a challenge. While ultimate raids are difficult, I don't want to oversell its difficulty. I think that they are difficult, and I don't think anyone's going to have an easy time with them. However, I don't think that they are inaccessible. I think it's mainly a matter of mindset, which I'll talk about later in the video. One of the coolest things about ultimate raids is that they are fully evergreen. I say fully in quotations, but the point is you can't out-level an ultimate raid, and you can't out-gear an ultimate raid. You are locked in to the level that they came out at. So, for example, if you were to go back to Uwu or Yukab, you are stuck at level 70. You are stuck at level 80 for T, and for Dragonsong War, you will be stuck at level 90. This is just how it is, and I think that's actually really cool, because it means that you're never too late to clear an ultimate. Now, that isn't to say that the difficulty stays the same. They do get marginally easier as time goes by, as we've seen in the older ultimates, where the DPS checks and the healing checks are, I won't say completely trivialized, but they are definitely way more generous now than they were back when they first came out. But that said, the mechanics are still difficult. You're going to still have to respect every mechanic. And so yeah, there's no such thing as being too late to clear an ultimate, even if you might get copy pasted for it. So I want to talk a little bit about setting expectations for an ultimate. Generally speaking, my rule of thumb for how long it takes to clear an ultimate is roughly about 80 hours. Now, of course, that can change depending on how experienced your static is, or how inexperienced your static is, and how consistent or inconsistent your party members are. Now, if you are pro gamers and you're consistent and you are very experienced, you can clear much faster. That is no question. And if you are newer and you have less experience, and if you're less consistent, it can take longer. But what that means is, if you're, say, raiding 3 days a week for 3 hours each, that's 9 hours of prog a week, you can say that you will clear an ultimate in roughly 3 months. So Ultimates are definitely a major time commitment, and there's kind of no avoiding that. Now, if you wanted to pug a ultimate raid, some of the ultimates are more easily puggable than others. Obviously, when you're pugging a raid, you put yourself to the mercy of Party Finder for that day. But that said, they are doable, and all three of the previous ultimates were pugged. And among the ultimates, Uwu and Yukab are considered some of the more easily puggable ones because the strategies are far more standardized. So let's talk a little bit about Dragonsong Ultimate. Obviously, when this video comes out, there's going to be a lot more information as the world first proggers are already going to be starting. However, that said, this is the information that we've been given thus far. We know that this raid is supposed to be closer to Yukab than, say, Uwu and T. And what that means, I'm not exactly sure, but those are the words that the devs have told us. And the devs have mentioned that it's going to be less puzzle heavy and more mechanics heavy. Uwu and T in particular had these puzzle mechanics that were in particular aimed, I think, at messing with world first proggers, and it took a lot of effort from multiple groups to kind of bash their head against this puzzle and try to solve a riddle essentially that's related to the lore of the fight. I know that sounds crazy, but that is how these mechanics were actually solved. There's actually a really great video done by Oryza and Mercury, who's in part of these world first groups, and he has a kind of a history lesson on some of these type of puzzle mechanics that were found in Uwu and T. So definitely check that out if you have the time. The devs have also mentioned that, quote, "I understand how the mechanics work, but somehow I can't get past it." And I wonder if that means that the mechanics are going to be just very difficult to execute. It's not that you don't know where you should be going or what you should be doing. It's just very difficult to actually do the mechanic. And I think about Yukab, especially in some of the later trios mechanics. So for people who haven't done Yukab, the trios section of the fight is basically mechanic spam. And there's a couple of different mechanics in there where you're forced to sort of react on the spot to what's been given out, and you're going to have to move very quickly to get to the correct spot and to adjust for your party. And it's hectic, it's fast, and I wonder if that's what the devs mean in terms of what the mechanics will be like in this new ultimate. They did mention that, you know, again, that Yukab is going to be what this new ultimate is going to be closer to, so I wonder if similarly it's going to have that kind of mechanic spam feel where you're just going to be bombarded with quick mechanics that you have to solve very fast. The devs have also mentioned that this might be the most difficult ultimate yet. They've said that an average group should be clearing in 4 to 5 months, which I know is a little bit longer than what I said before. Yeah, I mean, that's crazy that this might be the most difficult ultimate yet. I think the Epic of Alexander is personally what I consider the most difficult ultimate, and so I think if that is the standard to go by and this might be even more difficult, that sounds pretty crazy to me because the Epic of Alexander is definitely a crazy fight on its own. So yeah, I'm not really sure what that means, if like the mechanics are going to be super 5-head, if they're going to be super fast and daunting, but I'll definitely be watching the world first proggers in order to understand the strategies for the fight so that I can apply them for my own ultimate group, which will be streaming from Monday, Tuesdays, and I believe Thursdays from 7 p.m. and on Pacific time. So if you guys want to see us prog the ultimate fight, go check us out there, which is going to be in the description. So let's talk about preparing for an ultimate fight now. First off, you need to have gear. The gear is extremely important in ultimates, and the expectation for Dragonsong is that you are fully Savage Bis. That means you've cleared the tier, you've gotten the weapon, you've gotten the chest piece, you are fully decked out and ready to go. This is super important because in ultimate, the damage is generally higher, and the DPS checks can be extremely tight, which means that by not having this, you are severely impacting your chances on clearing the fight. This next one's kind of obvious, but players should be really comfortable with their jobs. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm going to elaborate a little further. So for DPS players, you're going to have to get used to some situations that don't commonly happen in sort of standard extreme and savage fights. You know, for example, because of the way that the ultimate fights are structured, there can be some very awkward downtimes or multiple targets and target swapping and maybe holding DPS at certain points. And so you're going to be bombarded with a bunch of new situations, and you're going to have to be comfortable enough with your class to be able to understand how to navigate through these sections without dropping a huge amount of DPS. For healers, it's going to be also very different because you are going to be forced to GCD heal far more than you ever had to in Savage. I'm speaking, of course, on a sort of more optimal level, because I think in Savage, if you're BIS, you can generally get by with never having to GCD heal, maybe with the exception of the very end of P4S. And so this is going to be very different. And the damage is going to be uneven, and it's going to be much higher. Tanks are going to take a lot of damage from autos. Famously in T, the second phase of the fight, BJ and CC, Brute Justice and Cruise Chaser, tanks take a crap ton of damage from the boss's autos, and the healers are having to constantly manage between raid wides and the tanks and constantly be healing them up. And it's a different type of healing experience than I think the other sort of difficulty levels that exist in Final Fantasy XIV. And of course, for tanks, I know I kind of just mentioned this, but the damage output is much higher, specifically on the tanks as well. The autos hurt a lot more. And so mitigation planning, this kind of goes for everyone, but doubly so for tanks, since so much of their mitigations will matter. Having an understanding of how to spread out your mitigations at the right time, and also just planning your mitigations in a logical way, is going to be very, very, very important for an ultimate fight. Next, I kind of want to talk about parsing mentality, because I think a lot of people who jump into ultimates are people who are very confident in their skills in Savage, and they've probably, tried to get those sweet, pretty numbers on the FF logs page. And I just want to say that ultimates are kind of a different beast. First of all, a lot of the ultimate fights don't really translate well by parsing, because like I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's a lot of awkward downtimes. There are parts where you actually have to even hold DPS. There's some weird strats with like how to pad your numbers in order to try to artificially boost your... So my point here is that ultimates aren't really the place for parsing. And I think that mentality that comes from Savage with parsing can be really toxic, in general, but even more so for ultimates. So I really, really, really want to stress that parsing does not matter in ultimates, and that it might even impact you, because in reality, ultimates are not a test of just specific execution. It's a test of your endurance, of your concentration, and how consistent you can be through a long period of time. Ultimate raids, like I mentioned before, are super long. They can take up to 18 minutes per run. And what that means is if you have people who are too busy trying to maximize their DPS and taking risks that they shouldn't be and dying for it, you can cost people a ton of prog time. The way I think about it is when you're getting ready to clear a fight and each run takes about 18 minutes, that means in a 3-hour session, you basically get less than 10 full runs to try and clear the fight. And every loss of time there is going to matter a lot. My next point about preparing for an ultimate might be a little bit contentious. However, this is something that I think is important to reduce your prog time in ultimates. Like I said, ultimates take a long time to get through. And so reducing that time is a good thing, right? What I wanted to say is it is so important in ultimate raids that you study up ahead of time. And I don't mean just watching a, quick video on how to do a mechanic. I mean really understanding and internalizing it. And the reason why I'm reiterating like this is because I've seen a lot of comments online, and I've raided with people like this who say stuff like, oh, I need to wipe to a mechanic. I need to see the mechanic in order to understand it. And like watching a guide only does so much. And I really, really stress how important it is that you don't fall into that mentality because how long the fights are. If you have to wipe to every single mechanic, every new mechanic that you're faced, your prog time is going to be significantly longer than for somebody who their group just can watch another group do it, understand what's happening, and apply that to their own gameplay even before they've seen the actual fight. Although most of the time the last phase of an ultimate is not the most difficult, there are still plenty of mechanics that you will have to respect. For example, in UCOB, the ending phase, Golden Bahamut, has exaflares, which are not a difficult mechanic by any means. However, dying to them is still extremely impactful to your chances of clearing. And so if you're somebody who's trying to clear UCOB, and you have to continually die to exaflares in order to understand how exaflares work, well, you've just costed your team a ton of prog time because it takes 15 minutes or so to get back to that point. And so I just want to stress how important it is again and again that I think it is a very good habit to try and learn how to do a fight through proxy rather than just having to bash your head into it during raid time. Kind of to explain my methodology to learning raids outside of actual raid time is I watch POVs of people doing the fight. What I like to do is I like to pause before a mechanic happens or as the mechanic tells are happening and try and ask yourself, where should I be going if I'm this person? Where should I be? And then unpause the video and see if they do what you thought was the right thing and see if they did it right. And hopefully through that method, you can continually kind of earn ultimate experience without actually having to be in the ultimate raid. And I think that's so important, especially for ultimates. On top of that, you can also learn ultimate mechanics through simulations. There are some pretty awesome programmers who've spent their time making simulations of some of the more difficult mechanics in ultimate fights. So like, for example, in UU, there's a predation simulator, which I use to get better at predation. There's a Heaven's Fall simulator for UCOB. And for T, there's an amazing wormhole simulator, which is a mechanic that stumps people for a long time in prog. However, because of the simulation, it's easier to understand what you're supposed to be doing in a lot of the different scenarios, because I think in general in ultimates the mechanics tend to have more variations in an ultimate fight than they do in, say, like Savage. So if you're looking to try an ultimate, I hope I haven't scared you off. I know that this is a lot of scary stuff that maybe I have said about ultimate raids. But again, I really think, like I mentioned before, it comes down to mindset. I think more than anything, what's tested here is your ability to be consistent and your endurance to making mistakes. There are going to be mistakes. There's no doubt about it. Even the best raiders in the world will accidentally wipe their party, and it just happens. And this is going to happen a ton of times, and you are continually going to wipe, and that's okay. And that is just the way it goes. And I think for people who get tilted and stuff like that, ultimates might not be the best place for you. You really have to learn to be immune to that stuff. And of course, there's the other extreme end where people are making far too many mistakes than they should be. But in general, you should be okay with the idea that you are going to wipe a few times as you learn the fight. Every wipe is a learning experience, and I really urge people who are progging ultimates to make sure that they are streaming it or have some way of recording their gameplay, so that way when people do wipe, you can always review the footage and see exactly what happened, so that you'll have a better idea of what to do next time. Obviously, a lot of the points that I talked about here are just sort of generic good raiding habits, and of course, doing an ultimate will make you a better raider. So I think those things go hand in hand, and I hope that these preparation tips are helpful. So yeah, to sum things up, ultimates are an incredible experience. I think that they are some of the biggest highlights in my Final Fantasy XIV career. There's really nothing quite like working at a fight with your friends for months and then finally reaching the end, and the adrenaline rush that happens as you near the clear and you finally get it. Oh, there's actually really nothing quite like that feeling, and I think ultimates just kind of capture that mystique, and of course you get shiny glam, and I think that's awesome. So I had a great time completing all the ultimate raids, and it's made me a far better raider, and it really just ups your level so much to try an ultimate raid. So yeah, anyways, I hope this video was helpful in terms of understanding ultimate raids in general in Final Fantasy XIV, and I hope to see more legends out there in Oryza. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!